I decided that I definitely want to review more Cables, and I wanted to pick out a good self-contained story from this great run by Joe Kelly and Josie Landiron. And I was torn between this one here, issue 57, and this one, issue 54, which has got a guest appearance of that Black Panther character off of that film. I settled for issue 57, and I didn't realise that the art for this one, other than the cover, isn't by Josie Landiron. The interior art is still really good, but it's not quite a stylistic match for Josie Landiron and his Jack Quimby inspired stuff. This issue, it presents a clever idea of having Cables, the time-travelling mutie, going up against Marvel's big time-travelling baddie, Kronos. This is back when he was an Egyptian Oreo. And before we even begin, I love it because we have got a fold-out recap page. These are the best things ever. If anyone watching this is making a comic or makes a comic, do one of these. These are brilliant. So Cables' mentor and benefactor, Blake Smith, he has been wounded, and now Cables, he is worried. And I'm not crazy about this whole narrative trope where you start off in media res and then you do flashbacks to show how we got there. It's a bit lazy. Like, it's kind of like you're saying, there is conflict in this issue. Eventually, just stick with it. One of the angles of this run is that Cables, he's trying to get more in touch with the then world. It is the past to him, but the present to us. And to that end, he has started frequenting this coffee shop where he routinely flirts around with a waitress working there. And we keep cutting back to the action that eventually happens. Cables and Blake Smith, they are in Egypt and a pyramid is collapsing on them, practically giving away the ending of the fight. Blake Smith here came to tell Kronos that his time machine was knackered, and here is some action with Cables fighting Kronos. The whole story is told out of sequence, which is more frustrating than it is worth. Here we're seeing how the pyramid started falling apart when Cables was locked in combat, and how Blake Smith got injured. Then we've got some more fighting, and this is a centerpiece of the issue for me. Seeing Cables fight an appropriate villain who he has never fought before. Back in the present of the story, we've got Cables and Blake Smith, and then Kronos' time machine. It starts leaking chronal radiation or time energy or whatever. Another flashback with Cables and the hot reporter lady who follows him around. And this is how we set off on this adventure. Cables, he went off to Egypt to help Blake Smith escape from Kronos. Other than a narrative choice, this is a good issue. Here we have got Cables, he is stuck in a time flux, and all his thought bubbles, they are out of order because of it. Quite an inventive idea. And we get some great Cables writing when he confronts Kronos. But then the story, it also ties in perfectly with that Generation Next I just reviewed, because in that, all the psychics, they had lost their powers briefly, and here, that is exactly what happens to Cables. This is that story apparently. It was Excellent Men issue 77. It looks like Fetish Fuel, she was involved in a big psychic fight, and it ended with all the psychic powers temporarily being stopped. Should I track this story down? Anyone interested in learning more about it? So Cables, his powers, they cut out during his fight with Kronos. And Cables, he looks like he's going to be defeated because he cannot even use any of his powers. But then, because he is Cables, he just shoots Kronos with a big gun. And with Kronos defeated, the two escape from the crumbling pyramid, and the time wave distortion doesn't really matter, and they pause for an ending splash page. This is a tough one. If it wasn't for how the story is framed, this would be a big recommend, but I just find the whole chopped up story to be a pain to read. Maybe in a few months I will reread this and try to read it in order. Maybe that'll be more pleasing. I do attest that this is still quality comics. I am gonna review much more of Cables' books, I think. He has got a lot of great stories. I rate this one 7 thumbs up.